Assalamualaikum everyone. I'd like to share with you this presentation regarding conflict management, conflict resolution, as well as conflict transformation. It is said that all people desire to live in a world of peace and harmony. I think all of us, peace educator, peace advocate, this is all what we want, to have peace and harmony in the world. Then according to Buddha, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. So once again, Buddha said, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. So this means that all of us, if we want peace, it's up to us kung paano tayo nag-iisip. Because we are the one, we make the world. So therefore, if you think positive thing, if you think negative thing, what will be the result? Kaya nga, nasa sa atin lahat talaga bilang mga mamamayan. Because we make the world. That's according to Buddha. Then it is said that conflict begins within the individual. In the beginning, God created everyone good. But when sin came in this world, parang nahati yung tao, may doble kara na. The selfishness within that person as well as the unselfishness with that person. So if we look at it, this is more on the positive as well as the negative. That's according to this presentation, that conflict begins within us as individual. Then the UNESCO preamble. The preamble, this is the introductory part of the Constitution of this United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. Since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be construed. So if you notice, this is more or less related also of what Buddha said. If you want peace, nasa sa atin pa rin, mga tao. Kasi tayo yung gumawa ng gulo, so nasa sa atin din na gagawa tayo ng paraan para sa tinatawag nating peace or para sa kapayapaan. As Buddha said, we are the one responsible. We make the world. So in man, there's a dual purpose. The mind, it should be the whole purpose. Then we have also the self-purpose. So if you look at the arrow, this vice versa, the whole purpose of man as well as the self-purpose. So that's the dual, the mind and the body, because we believe, of course, that man, we have the mind and we have the body. Then on the side of selfishness, or the living only for oneself. So these are the basis of conflict, the selfishness. We all know very well what is lust. Then being arrogance, then the vengeance, the greed, the prejudice, exploitation, human exploitation, as well as the natural, the exploitation of the environment. That's part of it. Prejudices, of course, with each other. In Mindanao, tinatawag may tribe people. The Moro, the Christianized, or the Christians, as well as the IPs, or the indigenous people. But dito, magka-problema dyan, with the majority, yung the prejudice, the biases, yung prejudgment of those people, nagka-problema. And of course, the greed, kasakiman, ang dami-daming mga sakim. So, yun yung living only for oneself. Then, paghihiganti, the vengeance, I think papasok dito yung tinatawag na rido, na hindi naman itinuturo ng Islam ang rido. Pero in practice, only in the Philippines nandyan. And you know very well the arrogance. So yun yung the basis for conflict of the other side of the person, the selfishness, living only for oneself. Then on the other side, the unselfishness of that individual, na sana ito yung dapat nating palaging mapossess, yung living for others, but the problem, kaya nga nahahati, the double cara, the selfishness as well as the unselfishness. So now, on the basis for harmony, if you want peace, dapat ito yon. Self-control, that's one. Then of course, serving others. Then to be fair, yung fairness. Then generosity. You give without counting the cost. Yun bang nagbibigay na hindi naghihintay ng kapalit. And of course, the forgiveness, which is the opposite also of vengeance. Then yung arrogance, opposite niya is humility. And we know, humility comes from the Latin word humus, which means soil. Kaya nga siguro, minsan maririnig natin pag may sumikat, palaging sinasabihan na huwag kalimutan na dapat ang paa ay nakatungtong pa rin sa lupa. That's being humble. Okay? So that's under living for others, which is the unselfishness within that individual. If we want peace, dapat nandyan yan. That's the basis for harmony. Then, you know very well who is this man, Nelson Mandela. According to him, the first thing is to be honest with yourself. You can never have an impact on society if you have not changed yourself. So this is a challenge to all of us, to change ourselves. Because if we will not change ourselves, of course, no way, no impact if we want to change the society. Nakakalungkot lang. First thing is to be honest with yourself. When you are still in elementary, in high school, kasulat lang yan sa pisara o sa mga dingding. Honesty is the best policy. But the problem, hanggang salita lang. Kaya nakakalungkot, hindi naman natin nilalahat yung mga leaders natin. The question, are they honest? That's the question there. Produkto pa naman sila ng mga religious schools. But the problem, this value of honesty, the virtue of honesty, nawawala na. Kaya nga, kung wala, so no way, we can never have an impact on the society. And we cannot change the society kung nasa pag hindi honest ang isang tao. So that's according to Mandela. Then there are sources of conflict. The first is the spiritual sources of conflict. The result of original ancestor separation from God and the negative influence from evil spiritual forces. We know in the world, we have the so-called positive, the negative, the good, and the evil. But there are times itong evil spiritual forces mas mabilis lumaganap kaysa sa positive. Kaya nga, this spiritual conflict, maybe in our own belief, we have the so-called indigenous spirituality. Then, some of us are being Christianized or being Islamized, nako-convert. Okay? But that original spirituality, minsan, nagkaroon ng conflict. Okay, not only the evil forces, but also the teaching. So that's the problem there. Then the next is the individual sources of conflict, the disunity within the individual, and confusion of values, especially the confusion of values. But it's sad to note that nowadays, Filipinos forget some of the Filipino values or even the universal values. Minsan nako-confuse na. Okay? Then family sources of conflict. So this is the dysfunctions affect succeeding generation. Kailan ito nangyayari? Pag wala si nanay, wala si tatay. So family dysfunctions. So minsan nagka-conflict. Kaya nga may problema sa pamilya. Then another thing is the national and international sources of conflict. This is more, the national policies affects the future generation and can lead to conflict within or between nations. And we know very well na ngayon, especially yung the law of the sea. Kaya nga, according to some of the experts, tayo, na maruan tayo sa China, sige tayo, parang nagipag-friendly alliance, nagipag-ally tayo sa kanila, but anong ginagawa nila? Gumagawa na ng base militar, inaangkin na ang ating karagatan na sakop sa ating bansa. Now, nag-react naman sila, the America and the other European countries. Tatlo yun sila, di ba, nabalitaan natin na para maprotektahan. So, nag-react naman ngayon ang China. And we know, ang China gusto din mag-superpower. Kaya nga, pag magka-letse-letse yan, magkagulo-gulo yan, apektado tayo, kawawa tayo. That's an example of international conflict, sources of conflict. Okay? And of course, we know the national source of conflict. Meron tayong kanya-kanyang mga rebelde. Pero medyo ngayon tahimik na naman, pero nandyan pa rin sila. That's more on the national source of conflict. Then in the sources of conflict, you look at this diagram. You have the organizational chains, the set of values that can be contrasting perceptions that can be another source of conflict, interdepartmental wrangles, then personality clashes, the threats of status, the lack of trust, the job-related issues, that's another sources of conflict, and the other agendas. So there are a lot of sources when we talk about conflict. But sinasabi dito, the individual choice, mayroon tayong pagpipili yan. Either we are going to resolve that conflict or we have to repeat the past conflict. So it's up to us. Gusto nating the nakaraan or we have to move on to the future. Kaya nga, each person passes either on the problem or the solution. So nasa sa atin talagang mga tao, especially, that's a challenge to all of us, peace advocate, peace educator. Okay? Peace lover. So ito yon, nasa sa atin. Balikan natin nakaraan or we move on to the future. I-solve natin yung problema, bigyan natin ng solusyon. So nasa sa atin yan. Then, there's a question. Does fighting resolve conflict? What do you think? Pero sinasabi man, fighting can be necessary for self-defense and to defend the weak. So I think we all know all of this. It's necessary yung fighting na yon. But, another thing, sabi, fighting does not resolve conflict. Defeating an enemy does not answer his grievances or end his hatred. Kasi dahil sa tao, nandoon pa rin yan. Then the defeated are tainted to seek revenge. So therefore, does fighting resolve conflict? That's the point there. Okay? Then there are bases of conflict resolution. Take note on this. If you want to lost or restored, so we have the state of harmony and state of conflict. You look at the arrow, vice versa yun siya. Indemnity conditions, the effort to reverse the process by which the original harmony was lost. So, nasa sa atin nga, it's up to us to restore the harmony or doon tayo sa manatili yung the state of conflict. But, in restoring the conflict, dapat mag-level up. One should transcend. Di ba we know that kanina, doble ka the selfishness and the unselfishness. Okay? From selfishness, one should transcend to unselfishness. Then from wrong, of course, to right. Then from broken relationship, to a loving relationship. That's one way na mariresolve. Madali lang itong tingnan, madali lang sabihin, but on the process, medyo mahirap ito. But challenge to all of us, from selfishness to unselfishness, from mali to tama, then lahat tayo nakaranas sa itong broken relationship, so dapat mag-level up to a loving relationship. So there are steps in conflict resolution. The first step, this is very basic, self-reflection and reorientation. Self-reflection and reorientation. Consider how one might have dealt with the problem differently. So yun yung dapat pagnilayan. Then, take responsibility for one's contribution to the conflict. Kung ikaw yung mediator, ito yung ipahayag, ipagnilay-nilay sa mga conflicting parties para malalaman nila, especially taking responsibility for one's contribution to conflict. Okay? Then, as Martin Luther King said, we never get rid of an enemy by meeting hate with hate. We get rid of an enemy by getting rid of enmity. So, ang ganda sa sinabi ni Martin Luther King. So, once again, we never get rid of an enemy by meeting hate with hate. We get rid of an enemy by getting rid of enmity. Second step of conflict, reversal or restitution. Kanina, pagnilayan, reorientation or reflection, self-reflection. Dito parang a reverse or restitution. Address whatever caused the other to feel hurt and violated. Kung ikaw kaya nasa katayuan, kung nagkasala yung isa, anong gagawin mo? Parang i-reverse mo. Then be open to efforts to reconcile. Then seek to correct the injustices. So yun yung i-reverse. Parang ipamukha mo, if you are the mediator, na kung nasa kalagayan kanya, anong maramdaman mo? Parang i-reverse. Third, reconciliation and renewal. That's the third step. Dapat kailangan nang i-give up yung paghihiganti for retaliation. May pagpapatawad na and be open to receive forgiveness. Kaya nga reconciliation and renewal. Then resolve to help the other to change. Then foster goodwill. Okay? That's more on reconciliation and renewal. Sana lahat na conflict ganitong mangyayari. Pero sabi nga, madali itong sabihin, pero ang hirap gawin ang prosesong ito. There are also detailed procedural steps in conflict resolution. Ayon naman sa ibang manunulat. Okay? The first is preliminary. So I'll just read this one. This step involves knowing full details of the conflict, and the first thing to note is the stage of conflict. The more advanced the stage of conflict, the more efforts are required to resolve it. Moreover, strategy used is also dependent upon the stage of conflict. So alamin talaga. Kaya nga, if you are the mediator, alamin mo ang buong katotohanan, buong nangyari bakit nagka-conflict. Then next, diagnosing the issue. So under this stage, the issue involved should be analyzed and understood what the conflict is about. So kaya nga, may diagnose, alam mo kung paano yon gawa ng solusyon. Ma-analyze mo na at naintindihan mo yung conflict. At kung ulitin ko, if you are the mediator o ikaw yung namagitan doon, ibig sabihin, ito yung alamin mo at i-analyze mo sa kabuuan yung conflict na yon. Then conflict handling modes, there may be numerous modes of conflict handling and have group into yon. Kung paano mo i-handle yung conflict. Avoid appearance of conflict and the purpose like-minded people should be appointed. Ayon. Third party nga. Then second, the mediation. It involves sweeping out differences by mediation through persuasion, highlighting the merits and demerits of their cases. Kaya nga, trabaho na ito ng mediator. You look at the drawing there, yung maliit dyan. Kung alam niya yon, yung nasa gitna, naka-blue. Kung alam niya yung lahat na senaryo, so it's up to him, her, na ma-mediate yung dalawa. Pakita yung the merits, ano na ikabubuti, anong hindi na ikabubuti sa kaso. Then, letting the parties to settle their scores. It is better when both the parties adopt a rigid stand on their views. Ayun. Okay? So, dapat, sana masettle sila. Then, the mutual problem solving, this approach is suitable when both parties are interested in resolving the conflict and are not rigid to their stand. So, pwede ito siya. Pero yung iba, nagmamatigas man. Ayaw ko dito, asa korte na lang ang magdesisyon. Ayun yung problema. Pero as much as possible, if you are the mediator, kung makaya, kayanin na. Kasi pagpupunta pa sa korte, magastos yan. So, may mga actions that lead to peace. From that, kung may na-resolve na, kung ikaw, isang mediator, isang peace advocate, peacemaker, so ito yung mga actions na dapat tandaan. First, we have mentioned this one, the humility. Admitting to not always being right. Being open to learn from others. To be humble. Sabi natin, humility comes from the word humus, which means soil. Then generosity. Giving beyond convenience. Giving unconditionally without expecting the return. So, you give without counting the cost. Yung nagbibigay na hindi naghihintay ng kapalit. The next is service. Showing acts of caring to meet others' needs, respecting the dignity of the recipient, reversing the exploitation through service. This is more on the unselfishness of the individual. Then the greatest act of love is winning over one's enemy. Wow. So, giving even to those who have done one harm, converts the enemy into a friend. Ang hirap. Then reverse ancient patterns of abuse and revenge. Ulitin ko, ang dali-dali itong sabihin, pero ang hirap ito gawin. Especially converting your enemy into friend. Pero makaya. Makaya yan. Sa mga Kristiyano, as what Jesus said, I say to you, love your enemies, and pray for those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. So that's according to Isa. That's in the Bible, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 44 to 46. Then may karugtong man yan. Kung tinapunan ka ng bato, tapunan mo ng tinapay. Kung sinampal ka, ipasampal mo din kabila. Ang hirap. But, pwedeng gawin at makaya ito. Love your enemy. Pray for those who persecute you, curse you. Do good to those who hate you. Ang ganda. Then, in Islam, in the hadith, my Lord, who is the greatest of thy servants in thy estimation? And the answer, the one who forgives when he is in a position of power. Wow, forgiveness, which is more or less related to what Isa said. From this hadith, the question is, my Lord, who is the greatest of thy servants in thy estimation? The answer is, the one who forgives when he is in the position of power. Kaya nga, forgiveness is very, very important. Kaya nga, pagsundin lang sana itong nasa hadith, walang rido. Walang rido. Because forgiveness is there. Okay? Then what is needed when I talk about leadership centered on love and to become an ambassador for peace? Ang kailangan lang ay ano yung attitude ng ambassador for peace. Maring tayo yon, maring kayo yon. show concern for both sides, walang kinikili lang, walang pabor-pabor, then affirm the value of both sides, gain trust from both sides that each is being treated fairly. Okay? Then aim to a win-win outcome. Lahat nanalo. Walang win-loss, walang loss-loss. Para nanalo, loss-loss, wala. Win-win dapat. That's according to Stephen Covey. The win-win situation, the win-win solution. Then, guide both sides beyond blame and accusation. So, yun yung dapat if you want to be an ambassador for peace. Yun yung dapat gawin. Then the there is a mediation skills towards the offender. Then help the offender accept the responsibility if you are the mediator. Ipaalam mo, iparamdam mo na tanggapin yung kamalian at saka yung the responsibility. Then encourage admission of wrong. Yan. Then help the offender accept the challenge or of reconciliation. Then avoid labeling or blaming. Then praise and offer a second chance. Sabi nga, kung may conflict ang mag-asawa, love is sweeter in a second way around. So why not give a second chance? Then help the offended. Ito naman, mediation skills towards the offended naman. Then help the offended forgive and release grudges. Then help the offended recognize own faults. Kung tinulungan mo kayo ng offender ngayon, the offended naman, iparealize din siya na ma-recognize na naman, alam mo, may mali ka din. Then help the offender accept an apology. Na tanggapin niya pag nanghingi ng tawad, then foster harmony and friendship with the offender. So yan yung dapat, ang ganda sana. Then in promoting peace and reconciliations, there are a lot of things na dapat gawin. Notice yung kasagsagan ng ball, then karoon ng agreement, may mga programs na ginagawa. Parang part of the peace building, di ba? Service program, sports competition, di ba? Naglalaro na noon. The rebelde as well as the military and the police. Ang ganda. Then cultural programs, then dialogue between religions, then women as peacemakers. So ito yung hamon din, especially the women as peacemakers. Kasi in dialogue or in the agreement, ilan lang mga babae na kinukuha as peace makers. Then itong dialogue between religions, maganda sana ito para maiwasan yung condemning each other, especially in the Christian world. Ang palaging kinakawawa kaming mga Katoliko, lahat na Protestante sila yung tama. Kami yung unbiblical, kami yung mga pagado. Kakahiya naman sa kanila kasi they are not open to dialogue at hindi nila maintindihan kung ano yung kanilang accusation kasi ayaw makinig. And that's the point there. So, dialogue is very, very important, especially among or between religions. Okay? Kaya nga sabi ko, kailangan din sana intra-dialogue. Hindi lang yung inter-dialogue, but intra-dialogue. Ngayon, mayroon sinasabi, interfaith dialogue. May mga gano'n din. This is more or less related to dialogue between religions. Kaya nga tayo magkaiba-iba mang relihiyon natin, but we have to broaden our horizon. Huwag yung very extreme mag-isip. Kasi remember, before na nag-exist religion natin, may nauna na sa atin. And do not accuse and do not judge na our religion is a wrong religion. It's not a true religion. Pag sure. Okay? Mahatma Gandhi said, "When I despair, I remember that all through history, the ways of truth and love have always won." So kagaya din to, more or less sinabi ni Mother Teresa, yung love na sinabi ko, sana'y pag-ibig na lang ang isipin bawat isa sa mundo. Kasi yun talaga, pag mag-love, yun yung nananalo pag may love. Okay. According to Sadat in his speech, any life that is lost in war is a human life, be it that of an Arab or Israeli. Innocent children who are deprived of the care and compassion of their parents are ours. They are ours. by the living in Arab and Israeli land. So, ibig sabihin, this is for the sake of humanity. Huwag na mag-away. Dapat nandoon yung pagmamahal pa rin, the compassion and care, especially to the children, kahit anumang lahi niya. Then according, I think this before is si Reverend San Myung Moon, one of the, I think, Secretary General of the UN. He said, the reason why God does not punish an enemy is that He is thinking of the enemy's parents, wife and children, who all love Him. When you understand that heart of God, could you take revenge on your enemy? Kaya nga kailangan pa rin for the sake of humanity, we have to love each other. Kung maiwasan ang conflict, dapat iwasan. Then, we're always talking about conflict. What about conflict? What is conflict? Conflict can be defined in many ways and can be considered as an expression of hostility, negative attitudes, aggression, and misunderstanding. Conflict may emerge between different organizations or within the organizations or between organizations and their social and political environments. So yun yung sabi ng isang author, sabi there are a lot of definitions. Then conflict is serious disagreement or argument between two or more persons. You look at the caricature, away sila, nagturuan sila. Yan, ilan yang mga lag dyan? 4 yan, 3 yan, 2 yan. So, pwedeng mag-aaway. So, that's the disagreement. Kasi ang mga tao, bright kasi. Then, another definition, according to Joe Kelly, conflict is defined as the opposition or dispute between persons, groups, or ideas. Si Foley nagsabi din, conflicts is the appearance of differences of opinions, of interests. Another is a condition that exists anytime two or more people disagree. It is just a natural phenomenon, either inherently good or bad, but there may be positive or negative outcomes. That's why when we talk about conflict, not necessarily conflict talagang negative yun. May positive thing din na idudulot itong conflict na yon. Then there are different views of this conflict. Take note, the traditional view, the first one. From 1930 to 1940, ito yung traditional view. The early approach to the conflict assumed that all conflict was bad. Conflict was viewed negatively. It was used with such term as violence and destruction. So, yun yung the traditional view. If there is conflict, it's automatically bad yan. But remember, there is also the positive, the negative when we talk about conflict. But in the traditional point of view, yun na yun. If there is conflict, all conflicts was bad. Then another view, the human relation. From 1940 to 70, the human relations position argued that conflict was a natural occurrence of all groups and organizations. Since conflict was inevitable, which cannot be avoided, it is accepted that there are even times when conflict may benefit a group's performance. So medyo maganda na itong human relations view. So kanina pag conflict bad, ito naman baka may idudulot ding maganda ang kinalalabasan. So this is now the view of human relations, 1940 to 70. The next, we have the modern view. This view is based on the belief that conflict is not only positive force in a group, but it is also necessary for a group to perform effectively. This approach encourages group leaders to maintain an ongoing minimum level of conflict, enough to keep the group viable, self-critical, and creative. So medyo gumaganda na itong view, the modern view naman. So unlike the traditional, sa human relation medyo maganda-ganda, then mas gumaganda naman itong modern view. Now, there are types of conflict. It is quite evident that to say that conflict is all good or bad is inappropriate. Whether a conflict is good or bad depends on the type of conflict. So take note. So there are many types of conflict. It's up to us. Good ba or bad ba siya? First is the functional or constructive conflict. Works towards the goal of an organization or group. Constructive, from the word in itself, maganda naman. Increase information and ideas. Encourage innovative thinking. That's the functional or constructive conflict. You look at the drawing. Naghilaan kung saan pupunta sa kakainin nila. Then, the next, parang nag-uusap sila kung anong gagawin, then sabay-sabay silang kumakain. So, constructive conflict. Naghilaan, pero at the end of the day, pwede palang magkasundo, pwede palang sabay-sabay, na pwede palang maiwasan yung conflict. So, yun yung sinasabi ng drawing dyan. Then the task conflict. The task conflict occurs when two parties are unable to move forward on a task due to differing needs, behaviors, or attitudes. It can be conflict over organizational policies and procedures, distribution of resources, or the methods or means of completing the task. Kaya nga, users have different needs. So, pag iba-iba yun, hindi talaga magkasundo yun. Pero, later on, pag pinag-usapan nila yun, I think magkakasundo-sundo yun. Kasi ganun yung tao. Iba-iba. Yung individual differences, iba-ibang pangailangan, iba-ibang pag-uugali. Pero nangyayari yan in an organization. Iba-ibang methods. Halimbawa, sabi natin, pag pakatayin ka ng manok, there are 1,000 ways. 101 ways of killing that manok. So, yun yung task. So, yung isa, kung ilan kayo, hindi dapat ganito yon. Hindi dapat isumbali muna. Hindi dapat ganito. Tanggalan muna ng mga balahibo bago ilagay sa mainit na tubig. So, nagkakaiba. Kaya users have different needs. So, nagdepende yan kung paano. Pero pag magkakausap, magkakasundo, wala namang problema. That's more on the task conflict. Then relationship conflict. Relationship conflict is a conflict resulting from either personality clashes or a negative emotional interactions between two or more people. You look at that, may image dyan. Nagtalikuran, bahala kayo dyan. Ikaw kasi, ayun, walang pansinan. So that's more on the relationship conflict. Mag-asawa, pwede din yan nangyayari. Mag-best friend, nangyayari din yan. Okay? So, there are levels of conflict based on this diagram. The individual, the group, and the organizational. Under the individual level of conflict, of course, you have the intra and the enter. Intra, that's a conflict within yourself. The enter, that's a conflict with your relation to the other. Then, sa group naman, we have the enter at saka intra. Intra-group, away-away kayo within the group, enter sa ibang grupo naman yung conflict. Then, organizational level, conflict, the enter as well as the intra. So, more or less, that's the level in this diagram when you talk about conflict. Then, what about this individual, the intra-individual conflict? This is an internal conflict that it involves the struggle between the character of his or her opinion. So siya lang, kasi entra within. And this has to do with individuals having to make choices between wrong and right, or even with overcoming emotion or mixed feelings. Kaya nga minsan nagsinumbagayan. Intra, your mind and your heart, naghihilaan yan. May demonyo, may mabuti. Okay, so it's up to you kay entra. Kay ikaw mismo, sarili mong conflict. Then what about the example? A father or mother tries to make a decision whether he or she is to stay with the family or take a job in another place or other in the country to get a better life for the family. So, usap-usap, alin sa dalawa? Alin ang masusunod o sino ang masusunod? Okay? Then we have the inter-conflict or the external conflict. The inter-conflict is a character. Take note, is a character. Struggles against an outside force such as nature, a physical obstacles, or another character. So that's enter. So kasali ibang tao. More on the character struggle against the outside force. Tingnan niyan dyan. Sa images na yan. So kanina, ikaw lang may isa ngayon, may iba na. Kaya nga enter. Nag-aaway, nagkukumustahan, pero galit pa rin sila. Kaya nga may bomba dyan, dalo-dalo ang isa. Ang isa nag-aaway, ang isa, yan, nag-wrestling. So that's enter conflict. Then what about this character versus character? A character struggle against another, character mental or physical, the two persons fighting. Ayun, halimbawa. Yan, character to character. Next, character versus nature. Take note. Man to nature. A character struggling with the forces or elements of nature, natural disaster, the flood, that is beyond his or her control, but struggle is usually done for survival. So take note, man versus nature. Kaya nga minsan ang mga tao, hindi mo rin maintindihan. Pag sige ulan, grabe naman ito ulan. Pag init, nagreklamo din init. Kung ikaw nature, kontra mo ang nature, you don't have a control. Kaya nga, naglindol naman na ganito. That's nature. Pero minsan, napansin ko, bakit ang nature nagkaganon? Kasi gumaganti na. Kasi sinasira ang nature, the Mother Earth sa mga tao. Sinisira natin. Okay? Ang ating inang kalikasan. So, nagka-problema tuloy. Then character, man versus the society. The struggle between a character or a group of characters fighting against the rules or laws that govern the society in which he or she lives. Example, religion and politics. Kaya sinasabi, there should always be a separation between the church and the state. Then it happened during the election. Okay? Dami-daming mga taga-simbahan na nakisali. Dami-daming, kaya nga, ang iba sinasabihan sila na there should be a separation between the church and the state. Pero sabi naman itong mga tao, we have also the right because we are member of the society. So kaya nga, ang conflict nandoon yan, man versus society. Okay? Kita mo yung pula na drawing dyan, ikaw versus the society. Okay. Then the intra-group, what about this intra-group conflict within the group? The conflict refers to disputes among some of all the group's members which often affect the group's performance. Ayan. Then the intergroup conflict naman or between the groups, intergroup conflict arises out of interaction of various groups. Intergroup conflict refers to the conflict between groups, departments, between groups is frequently and highly visible. So yung intergroup conflict. Then organizational conflict, the conflict which arises within various levels of the departments of organization. The various kinds, it can be horizontal or it can be vertical. Usually, itong the intra-organizational conflict, it happens halimbawa dito sa ating institusyon. So, various levels and the departments, minsan in an organization, hindi yan nagkakasundo. Okay? Nagtuturuan. Then the inter-organizational conflict, interactions resolve the conflict among the different organizations. However, it is not necessary that such interaction may result in conflict. Hindi naman talaga necessary. Kung pwedeng mapag-usapan, pag-usapan. Kasi nasa isang organisasyon nila, organisasyon mo, pwede namang magkakasundo for the betterment of your organization. Then the most common conflicts occurred in the organization, ito yon: lockouts, strikes, issues related with performance appraisals, resistance to change, the conflict related with emotions, conflicts due to frustrations. So yun yung the most common conflict occurred in the organization. Then to continue, how? There's a question. How do you or how did we learn our own style of conflict management? So there are different styles of conflict management. May mga model tayo like the role model, the family role models. We have the celebrity role models, the teacher and the media role models. Ang problema itong sa family, kung dysfunction yung pamilya ninyo, magka-problema. Okay, celebrity role models, karamihan kabataan, celebrity Hollywood actors sa Pilipinas, mga role models nila, pero the problem, ang mga role models nila, hindi naman dapat magiging modelo. Teachers, mentors and coaches, kasali ako dyan, sana magiging role model din ako, kasali din kayo. Of course, we are all peace advocate, peace educator. Then what about the media as role model? Problema sa media, minsan bias. Sabi nga ni Enriquez, walang kiling-kilingan, serbisyo lang ng bayan ng kailangan. Pero may problema sa media. Okay? Sinisensationalize nila ang balita. Okay? Kaya nga tayo sa Cotabato, minsan mapunta tayo sa Maynila, mapunta tayo sa Cebu, akala nila ang gulo-gulo ng Cotabato dahil sa media. Okay? Kahit na may nagpapatayin, hindi naman sa Cotabato, dahil Cotabato ang na-mention na. Kaya ang sama-sama ng imahen sa Cotabato. Yun ang problema. Then may mga personal styles in dealing with conflict. Yan, kagaya sa mga hayop na yan. Yan, at saka yan. Kung ikaw turtle, gusto mong i-avoid. Kung ikaw teddy bear, kailangan i-accommodate mo lang, di ba? Very dominant itong shark. Then, ang fox naman, gustong i-compromise. Ang owl naman, integration. Kung depende sa style nga, sa conflict, yung personal style mo. Pero anong maganda dyan? I-accommodate mo lahat? Dominant ka? Gusto mo i-compromise o integrate? Ang fox, kung compromise, mas okay. Pero ang integration ng owl, mas maganda. So, yun yung makikita natin sa mga karakter din sa mga hayop na yun na pwede nating may apply in our style in dealing with conflict. Then conflict has both positive and negative effects. It can be positive when it encourages creativity, new looks at old and clarification of points of view, and the development of human capabilities to handle interpersonal differences. So take note, it can be positive if it encourages creativity. Then conflict can be negative when it creates resistance to change, establishes turmoil in organization or interpersonal relations, foster distrust, builds a feeling of defeat, or widens the chasm of misunderstanding. So that can become negative. Okay? Kaya nga, ito yung dapat tandaan natin. Then, the positive effects of conflict, meron. The acts of motivating factor motivate individuals to do better and to work harder. One's talents and abilities come to the forefront in a conflict situation. So that's more the positive effects. Acts as motivating factor. Then it also acts as need satisfier. Satisfy certain psychological needs like dominance, aggression, esteem, and ego, and thereby provide an opportunity for the constructive use and release of aggressive urges. Then another contributing factors, the introducing variety. Add variety to one's organizational life, otherwise work life would be dull and boring. So yan. Then creating understanding. Facilitate an understanding of the problem, people, and interrelationships between people. Better coordinations among individuals and the departments, in addition to strengthening intra-group relationship. Okay. That's more on creating understanding. Then what about the negative effect? So kanina that's a positive effect, pero ito yung dapat bantayan natin itong the negative effect of conflict. Drop in productivity. If it is, kung nasa isang organisasyon na isang kumpanya kayo. Allowing a conflict to continue means that employee attention becomes more focused on the conflict and not on productivity. So, drop in productivity. So, that's the negative effect. Then, lack of direction, another effect, negative effect. Conflict can be sometimes arise when management is unable to communicate the direction of the company to employees. Conflict will erupt as employees are allowed to interpret changes within the company in their own way. Yun, pag walang mission, vision, and goals yung isang company, magkalit-silitsa talaga yon. So that's the negative effect of the conflict. Kung hinayaan mo yung iba't ibang employee na gagawa ng kanyang sariling interpretasyon. The next negative is the lack of the new ideas. Groups in conflict tend not to collaborate on new ideas. When conflict goes unresolved, it can be difficult to create new ideas. The company needs to resolve problem it is facing. So yun, the lack of new ideas. Then, another negative effect, the affects quality of work. Of course, alam natin ito. If conflict is allowed to go on long enough, the parties involved may begin to show more interest in the conflict than in doing their own job properly. Product quality can suffer, and in some cases, the safety of the employees can be jeopardy as well. So yon, it affects the quality of work. So, in order to resolve conflict, there are elements of communication na dapat nating tingnan. Like the source, the person that begins to initiate the message. Then, this is the elements of communication. Alam natin to na we can apply in resolving or helping to resolve conflict. Then, the message, the information or the meaning. Then, the channel, the medium through which message is transmitted, then the receiver or yung tagatanga, the person who is targeted to the message. Can, according to study in the elements of message meaning, 7% ang verbal, facial expression 55%, the tone of voice 38%. Then 90% the meaning of the message comes from non-verbal sources. That's why a challenge to all of us, we educators, maganda yung non-verbal. Kasi malaking tulong yun. Kaysa sa verbal, it's just only 7%. Okay. That's according to study. Then, to continue, what about this conflict management? We know what is conflict, the conflict resolution. What about conflict management? Conflict management is the positive and constructive building of difference and divergence. Rather than advocating methods for removing conflict, it addresses the more realistic question of how to deal with it in a constructive way, how to bring opposing sides together in a cooperative process, how to design practical and achievable cooperative system for the constructive management of differences. Kaya conflict management, paano mo good i-manage yung conflict? So yun lang ganun mga sinasabi natin. What about conflict resolution? It emphasizes on the intervention by skilled but powerless third parties working unofficially within the parties to foster new thinking and new relationships. They seek to explore what the roots of the conflict really are and to identify creative solutions that the parties may have missed in terms of positions. Okay, that's more on the conflict resolution. John Paul Lederach, kilalang-kilala natin ito sa peace. Okay? According to him, what about this conflict transformation? It provides a comprehensive set of lenses for describing the ways conflict emerges from, evolves in, and bring about changes in a personal, relational, structural dimensions, and for intervening to promote peaceful change through non-violent mechanisms. So kung may conflicts, titingnan mo dyan daw sa iba't ibang set of lenses sa dami-daming mga mata para ma-resolve, then para ma-transform and bring this to personal, relational, and structural dimensions. Kaya nga, natatransform na yung conflict. Ibig sabihin, wala nang away. Na-resolve na. May resolution pero na-transform. Nag-level up na siya. Then, we have the models also of this conflict resolution. Negotiation, alam naman natin yan. Disputing parties agreed to solve their problems by taking about their concern face-to-face and working together to find the solutions that is mutually acceptable. It is this form of intervention that the disputants maintain greatest degree of control. So, the form, then the diagram, you look at the diagram. Dalawang arrow, magkaibang direction, but kailangan yung tinatawag nating negotiation. So, yun yung mga disputing parties. Then, we have the conciliation. Conciliation generally considered to be the ongoing work to prepare and sustain the groundwork and people for engaging a constructive engagement of a decisive issues, broken relationship, and negotiation. Conciliator is a third party that encourages disputing parties to solve problem. So, tingnan yung diagram. Okay? Kanina, negotiation, dalawang arrow. Ito, dalawang conflicting. So, kailangan yung conciliator. Then, a dialogue, the conflicting parties agrees to discuss and share their ideas on the issues that they disagree. The focus of dialogue is building relationship by recognizing differences and working together on the modalities. In dialogues, problems are discussed but solutions are arrived through the process of sharing, listening, and reflection. So maganda din itong dialogue na gagamitin. Then mediation. Mediation builds on the conciliation but generally thought to be the more direct involvement of the third person or a team to provide facilitation of dialogue, negotiation, and rebuilding of relationship. Mediation is voluntary, cooperative problem-solving process which is a personal group acceptable to conflicting parties, assist them in a clearly defining the issues in conflict or helps them work towards a resolution that is mutually acceptable. So yun yung tinatawag nating mediation. Arbitration naman, a conflict resolution model where two disputing parties agree to appoint a person or a group who will solve their dispute. Arbitration, the third party makes a judgment after hearing both sides of the dispute. Disputant no longer have decision-making power. Sila nang bahala, yung arbitrator nang bahala. Whatever is the decision, yun na yung susundin. Okay? Third party talaga ang nagde-decide. tinatawag itong the arbitrator. Then the adjudication, model of conflict resolution where the disputant agree to resolve their differences in court. Mas grabe na, mas magastos na ito. The courts are well established as a form of dispute resolution in North America as well as in the other countries as well as in the Philippines. Pero pag may conflict, kung pwede mang maresolba na, kaya nga sabi natin yung amicable settlement, doon na, huwag na ipaabot doon sa kataas-taasan. Kasi pag ipaabot sa kataas-taasan, grabing na yon, magastos na yon. So the references, John Paul Lederach, si Antiquesa, the Conflict and Manual Model. So iyon ang references. So there's a saying, fails means first attempt in learning, and is not the end. In fact, end means effort never dies. If you get no as an answer, remember that no means next opportunity. So let's be positive that all conflict must be resolved na hindi na ipaabot doon sa kataas-taasan kasi magastos yon. So daghang salamat sa inyong pagpamati. God bless everyone. Dalaygon ang Diyos.